little smaller. Here.
Cool.
All right.
Welcome, everybody. It's halfway through the week. The first part is over. The second half begins right now. This is your place that you need to be, you want to be, the only place that there's ever going to be. Fact of the matter is, we, as always, love you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is the Metal Summit. It is the holiday episode of the Metal Summit as we approach the holiday season, celebrating Happy Hanukkah, members of our team, Merry Christmas, members of our team, and we really appreciate, as always, you guys joining with us tonight. We, as always, are your island of misfit toys. We've got Angel, Jason, Bobby, Psycho Steve. I'm Jay. I'm just about to bring in our guest, but before we get everything started with that, I think it's important for us to take a quick second to recognize the unfortunate loss that we had today. Another member of the rock community that went up to the Ultimate Jam session in Mr. Leslie West, from who we lost today. Bobby, I know you took that one kind of hard today.
Yeah, it sucked, man. 2007, I had the opportunity to play with Leslie at BB King's in New York with Mark Hudson and Paul Stanley. So it was an honor to share the stage with him. Leslie was great. We did a couple things at SIR in New York, and was really fortunate to have my mom there when I performed, and my sister and my niece. But, you know, it was gosh, I remember hearing Mississippi Queen for the first time, and, you know, I told Leslie that. I said, you know, dude, that there are a lot of songs that are iconic, but it's, you know, it was just, and what a great guy. The things that he went through in his life, and, you know, yeah, it's going to be deeply missed. Great rocker.
Absolutely, man, 100%. I mean, the fact of the matter is, no matter what preferred genre of rock, of metal that you listen to, Mississippi Queen is just one of those songs that everybody's going to know. You might not necessarily know who put it out, especially as, like, the young start taking our place and keeping rock and metal alive and stuff like that. But Mississippi Queen is, from its riffs, from its writing, from its delivery, that song's never going to go anywhere. So we definitely send our condolences out to the West family, to Leslie's dear friends, colleagues, and peers in the music industry. And we want to take this moment to bring in our guest for this episode of the Metal Summit, former Banshee singer, solo artist, songwriter extraordinaire, Mr. Tommy Lee Flood. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. All right.
Absolutely, man. Well, since that was our opening segment, do you have any particular memories, or did you get a chance to meet Leslie yourself throughout your career?
I never met him, but, you know, growing up, you know, obviously, you know, I'm old enough to tell you I cut my teeth on listening to him and Mountain. And, yeah, I did not know that until you just said that. Where have I been today? Was that?
It just came over probably about 7 o'clock. His wife posted.
Well, yeah. I've been struggling with a new phone. My phone blew up today, so I had to go get a new phone. And I've been trying to learn how to use it, so I'm very technically challenged. So that's probably why I didn't hear that. But, yeah, that's sad news. Yeah, Rocky Mountain Way, I mean, you can't, you're right, that'll be with us forever.
Rocky Mountain Way, Mississippi Queen, I mean, it's just so... It's just the way, for sure. Angel, Jason, Psycho Steve, do you guys have any particular memories of getting to meet Leslie, or just anything about those tunes?
Unfortunately. Really? You never got a chance to meet him? I got a chance to meet him and Corky Lang, and I talked about Rocky Mountain because if you listen to some of the music, and I'm not a musician, as you guys know, that's why I do radio. It's very similar to Love Gun or Detroit Rock City with the riff, like the drumming. And I brought that up to him. And then he started talking, this is Leslie speaking to me, about Paul, because him and Paul were pretty tight, apparently. Wow. And I didn't know this. Leslie lived in Jersey.
Yeah, he lived right in East Meadow, right over near Hackensack. Grew up in Hackensack.
I never knew that until I actually spoke to him about it.
And he was a man of the tribe.
Yeah, you know, that's what he was an MOT like me, so it was pretty rad. So we talked about that and everything. He was just a really good guy. We talked about his health because he was a diabetic. We talked about that and stuff like that, and we talked about music and certain types of food that he liked to put on his rider and stuff like that. And he was just like a really genuine, cool kind of guy. You know, he wore these like thick glasses, everything. And when I was talking to him, when he was sitting, it was at Starland. There's a club, just to keep you abreast of it, Tommy, called the Starland Ballroom. It's a pretty popular club here in central New Jersey, and he played there. And he was just sitting in the backstage on the couch before he was actually going to play. He was just sitting on the couch, just twiddling and playing and just talking to me, like shooting the shit like we are right now. And he was just like a really, cool guy. I just didn't know that he was from Jersey and all these things until I had the opportunity to talk to him. I just wish I wish I got a chance to take a picture with him. But he was just, he will definitely be missed. Thank you, Mr. West, for all the great music, and your music, will live on forever. Simple as that.
Absolutely, 100%. Well, Tommy, bringing it back over to you, you within a day, as in yesterday, had the remastered release of your Flood album. So talk a little bit about that, getting reworked, being re-released, and, your excitement working on it and what you're looking for out of it.
Well, some of the songs, were recorded quite some time ago. After I left Banshee, I worked with Lee Jackson and put a project together with the drummer from Banshee, Kent Burnham, and we recorded an album. And then it wasn't long after that album was out. I mean, we had a P&D deal with Shooting Stars guys, but it didn't last long. And then I took the guys back in the studio after the band split up, while we were still all talking and friends, because everybody was great musicians, and wrote some new songs and recorded them. And then I just thought, I want to remaster this stuff and retool it. And it all started with me just wanting to put everything together in a compilation album and get it out, because grunge and alternative had set in, so it was hard to get anybody to listen to anything other than that kind of music. So I had the music. I finally had some money, and with my dear friend Dave here in his wonderful studio, and he's very talented, we decided to go in and do some re-editing and retooling, remastering, and then to kind of orchestrate it. And it was just going to be to put it together to preserve it. And then my friend Scott Ellis, who runs the websites, he stepped in and helped do the finishing touches on the website, and we decided to put it out, and now it's just been officially released. It was all just about preserving the music, and getting it out to people. So, and I have another album that I recorded that I would like to finish mixing. It's much heavier, and it's finished. The recording is finished. It just has to be mixed, and it's really just about money. You guys got any money?
I have a studio. I produce.
I could start a GoFundMe page, man. Just kidding.
We're with you, brother. We're trying to get some of that ourselves.
Here. But yeah, so it's 10 great songs, very heavy, and more current with what's going on right now. Where the Flood stuff, some of it I don't think has a time stamp to it, but some of it obviously has some 80 rock influence, and some of it's heavy, some of it's more commercial. It's definitely much more diverse than Banshee. Banshee was primarily, we started out as a heavy metal band, conceptual metal, and we were that style of music on Metal Blade Records worldwide and on the first album. And then when Atlantic stepped in and picked us up, I had written a song called Shoot Down the Night. It was really just kind of a straight, hard rock song. And Atlantic really liked that song, and it kind of, helped change the direction of Banshee a bit. But Atlantic really thought, look, this is something that we can market to HOR radio as opposed to college metal radio. And so it did change the direction of Banshee somewhat, but we tried to walk the razor's edge and not lose the fans that we gained off the Metal Blade record. We didn't want to, completely change our sound. So there's, like when you listen to Banshee, you'll hear a graduation of conceptual metal to more of a straightforward hard rock with, more commercial elements. But so the solo stuff is basically, to me, it was an opportunity for me to branch out and, just write good songs. When you're on a label, once you wrote, a song and they like it, they want you to write 10 more songs just like it. You kind of get pigeonholed where they're controlling everything. It was very tough to swallow that pill, being as we created Banshee, built that band up from the ground, marketed ourselves, built our following up, promoted every concert that we ever played, and then you sign to a major label, and all of a sudden you have no control. They tell you what songs you get to play. They tell you when to play, how to play, who you can record with or not. I mean, you can't even really record under or play under the name Banshee unless you have their permission, the permission of the label. So when I went solo, it was really about, I'm not going to be strapped in anymore. And so I kind of just branched out. I was able to, do some stuff that's a little more, it's different than Banshee, but you can definitely hear the graduation. It wasn't like coming out and going totally off the rails. I think the fans they'll love it. It's and they're gonna get some really heavy stuff. Soon. I'm gonna get back into the heavy stuff. So anyway, so that's what it is. It's just about getting the music out there, really.
For sure, man.
It's all just money, man.
Yeah, without a doubt.
It's just money, baby.
Yep. We love we love things heavy, and it doesn't get much heavier than our Beard of Doom. Psycho Steve, get in here.
All right. So the question is, and everything, was vocals your first instrument, or did you have an instrument and then you turned to vocals?
I was a drummer. That's a great question. I was a drummer. And it's kind of weird. A lot of people will say, oh, they dreamed all their life they were going to be in a band, making music. And I just started playing drums when I was in high school. And it wasn't like I had any illusions about being big or in a band, being famous or anything. I wanted to play football for the Patriots. I'm not kidding you. But, I just obviously wasn't big enough. But as a drummer, I was a good drummer, but I would have never made it as a drummer. My drummer for Banshee, Kent Burnham, he is so far beyond where I would have ever been able to be as a drummer. But the irony is that I was burglarized and my drum kit was stolen, and so for a couple of years I didn't do anything, and then I answered an ad in a magazine that was looking for a singer. I went out and I bought a used SM58 Shure microphone, wanted to look professional and, show up with my own mic. And I went out and I got that gig when I auditioned. And then that gig ended up leading me to be in my first professional touring band called The Lick, which was basically the only real band that I was in as a vocalist before I started Banshee. So I toured with that band for 4 years and cut my chops, learned the ropes, and then felt like it was time to move on and write my own songs. So I moved to Kansas City and started Banshee with Terry Dunn.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I never dreamed of being a singer, just so you know.
Okay.
Not in choir or anything. It found me. I still sometimes I scratch my head and think, how the hell did that happen? But obviously it was meant to be, I think.
Right.
Absolutely, man, for sure. Bobby Dreyer, looking sharp as always, sir.
Yeah, I got to rock a little bit. Got to go into the Griswold mode. So, it's that time of the year,
Don't hate me because I'm a Chiefs fan, man.
Hey, man, it's okay. Look, I'm ready to give you our next coach and flip it over. Either that or we'll give you Wentz, but I don't know. Hurt's doing okay, but out of the football thing. So Banshee is still around, and I'm looking at a couple things now. So, look, when you guys started out, you very much emulated a lot of the bands of the time, Poison, Crew, this and that. Everything goes through an evolution. You were talking about your new music being heavier. What would you do a comparison of it to? Would you say that you veered away from the glam end, that you went more to Northern California like Metallica did when they, shunned away from the Strip? Or are you trying to go after something a little bit different now?
Well, on the flood compilation, there are some heavy hitting songs on there as far as heavy, but it has a lot more versatility than Banshee. Banshee was definitely heavier than the Flood CD overall. The new stuff that I have not released yet, that I'm still waiting to mix, it's definitely heavier than Banshee, and it's really more what's current with what's going on now. I really hooked up with some crazy cats out of Lawrence, and they had a totally different sound, and it was something that I wanted to explore, and they were willing to come together with me, an 80s rocker, and we kind of collided. That it's called the Bipolar Project, and it's like two colliding forces, old school meets new school, and it's kind of a hybrid sound. So, but as far as Banshee, we started out, and I would say everybody used to say, "Hey, man, you sing like Ronnie James Dio," So that was a big compliment for me when I was young.
Of course.
Dio was my mentor, and I used to, in the Lick band, we used to cover some Ronnie James Dio stuff, and people used to say, "Man, you really sound like Ronnie James Dio," and that was a big compliment. So on the first album, Crying the Night, you definitely hear all of our influences. When you cut your first records, you really don't know who you are. You're just trying to come out there and do the best you can, and you're finding your way. So writing songs and producing and everything, you're very green. And you're just, like, we financed our own album. We produced it, released it, marketed it. You had to do all those things back in the day. So it was our best effort with the money that we were able to raise and do that, and the knowledge that we had. And of course, we were in the Midwest, so there was no industry here to tutor us or, assist. Our whole goal was we want to create enough sensationalism in a small market to bring the industry to us, because we really felt like if you went to LA or New York, we would be one of many, obviously many bands out there everybody was going to LA, even guys from the East Coast, were going to LA.
Of course.
And it was like, I always had a gut feeling like, you could afford a really good rehearsal hall in Kansas City for $300 or $400 a month with a nice sound stage. You could get great studio time. I had a great following. My guitar player had a great following. So we had a lot of hype going for us when we hooked up to form Banshee. So studios were jockeying to get us into their facility and offering us studio time for like $20 an hour. So you couldn't get that on the East or the West Coast. So in order to do a great record and to try to build this thing from the ground level up, we decided to stay in the Midwest and hopefully create enough sensationalism that we could bring the industry to us. So after we released our first album, people said it was like D-Reich. It was like Dio, Queensryche. We were kind of in the middle, which was a huge compliment. Don't get me wrong, because, being compared to those two bands, that was awesome. But so after we sold 30,000 units and the record store chains out here, we really started to draw some attention. We were playing anywhere from 1,500 seats to 3,000 seat venues. And we didn't play a lot. We strategically only played 2 or 3 times a year, but we always rented a nice venue and promoted and produced a great concert. I designed a hydraulic drum riser that would go 16 feet tall, and you'd have to have some guys hanging on it underneath of it when it was coming down, so it came down level. It didn't dump the drummer off the front, but it did work, and it was a great illusion. And I blew fire, and we had flame thrusters, and we wanted to control the element of the show, or And we brought people to us, and it was like if you weren't at the concert, you were wishing you were there. And I think we played a total of 7 shows before we were inked to Metal Blade, and 8 shows. On the 8th show, we played up in Omaha, Nebraska. Atlantic Records flew in and said, "Look, you guys are playing for 3,000 people. We're at the Civic Auditorium, the Music Civic Auditorium." They said, "We're signing you." So the gut feeling, and the instinct, it all paid off. I mean, there wasn't anybody to tell us we were crazy to think that. But the thought of going to LA, like so many people, I had many friends of mine's bands went out there, and they struggled. They struggled to find a place to rehearse. Half the time the bands would break up because some guy wasn't paying his share of the bills or whatever. So there was conflict internally within the band. And while we had the momentum in the Midwest, we just felt like, look, as long as we're going up, we're gonna stick it out here and try to keep our be true to our roots and our sound. And Kansas City at the time was a great up and coming market. And there was a lot of fans here that were really ready to believe in a band that could go all the way. So, with that being said, great fans. And we had a team of people that worked really hard to help us out. And, it was it was a lot of work and money.
Of course.
And money. Yeah. So, we all worked day gigs, and threw our 2 cents in, and but by the time we did the debut with Atlantic, the second record, we worked with Eddie Kramer and got to work with Sam Ginsberg and John Matthias, and at that point we started to come into our own and come with our own sound. I mean, where you can really hear Race Against Time, that second album, you can tell we're definitely Banshee. We're not trying to be like anybody else. We always made our own clothes because we didn't really want to emulate that many, other bands. I think there was probably 3 or 4 clothes companies out there, Lip Service and some other companies that used to sell rock clothing. And we just got into making our own clothes. We didn't want to be studs and heavy metal, but we didn't want to be glam. We just wanted to be a really good looking band somewhere in the metal where we were playing good hard rock and having our own image. So we worked hard at trying to be unique. So, but everybody has their influences. So I met Ronnie James Dio, and he told me nobody sings like me. So, I'm not kidding you. True story. My guitar player was friends with Vivian Campbell, and I remember I was painting. This was in the interim. We'd released the first album, but we still all had day gigs. So I was a painter, and I was working for a guy, and Terry Dunn calls me up, and he said, "Man, I'm down here in Westport, and I'm hanging out with Ronnie James Dio. They were in town for the Sacred Heart tour." And he said, "I'm hanging out with Vivian and Ronnie James Dio. You need to come down," because he knew how much I idolized Ronnie James Dio. And so I went to my boss, and I'm like, "Hey, I gotta go. I gotta go. Ronnie James Dio's in town." And so he cut me loose, and I went down to the Lone Star. Was a venue in Westport, and it was just the band. And Terry was slightly buzzed, and he grabbed me, and I'm in my painter's clothes. And he grabbed me, and he pulls me up to Ronnie James Dio, and he's like, Ronnie, I want you to meet my singer. This is Tommy Lee Flood. He sings just like you." And Ronnie James Dio jumped up in my face. He goes, "Nobody sings like me. Nobody." And it freaked me out, dude. I jumped 10 feet back. I was like, "Oh, God, don't curse me, man." and he realized how bad he freaked me out. He says, "But nobody sings like you." And literally, that had such an impact on my life where I thought from that moment, I mean, as big of a Dio fanatic as I was, I thought, I will never try to sing like Ronnie James Dio anymore. I'm going to try to figure out who I'm going to be. And I think it was destiny that I had to meet Dio and have him jump in my face and, freak me out, to where, I realized, hey, it's about being yourself, trying to be yourself. So.
Well, that's got to be kind of a tricky situation, having people tell you that you sound kind of like Ronnie James Dio, or to a certain degree, somebody like Jeff Tate. I mean, we got to kind of commend you for not falling into that trap, because it kind of is a trap, and not, hurting yourself or your band sounding like these bands. and realizing that you had to create your own style?
Well, when I worked with Eddie Kramer, and Eddie worked, he did Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix, Carly Simon, Spooky Tooth, the Beatles, David Bowie, you name it. I mean, he had so many wonderful pieces that he had done as a producer, and he literally said the most important thing. He said, you do all these crazy things with your voice. If you could just combine all these unique things into one overall killer style. He said, you got this great split scream, but you do it too much. And that's, one of the reasons we had Banshee, because I did this high split scream. And it really came fairly easy. I don't know where it went. It doesn't come easy anymore, but it used to come pretty easy. But he said, that thing's really, it's incredible. I've heard, Ian Gillan do that, and a couple other singers. He goes, but you do it too much. He said, you do it just about on every song. He goes, now if you would just do that a couple times on the album, or maybe one or two times a night during your show, he said, it would literally, people would sit on the edge of their chair to hear you hit that note. But if you do it every song, it just becomes this normal thing. And he really, working with Eddie Kramer was probably really what helped me find myself as a singer, and my craft, is trying to be me as a singer and not, try to sound like anybody else, other than Ronnie, kind of freaking me out. But
for sure.
But Eddie was, it was like it was a blessing to get to work with him. I learned so much from him in our days with, doing pre-production with him.
Absolutely, for sure. Jason, it's all you, my good bro. Let's bring you in for a second.
Hey, so Tommy, I guess that's my second, but earlier on when you were talking, you had mentioned, this is kind of like, I wasn't planning on asking this, but sometimes it's spontaneous, but earlier on you were talking about building a hydraulic system for the drums. Is that something, do you have like an engineering background, or how, or is that something else that you dabble in?
Well, it comes from, when you're a musician, you do a lot of things to pay the bills, right? So I was a master of a lot of different things. I worked in a precast factory, where I became a welder, and obviously, we made very, super concrete structures, and, poured them, precasted them. And so there was always hydraulics going on. So the bass player for Banshee, Chuck Hopkins, me and him both worked at this precast factory. So we both were great welders, and we both had, knowledge of hydraulics. And in my first band, the Lick Band, which Chuck was actually the guitar player in that band as well, we had a hydraulic light show. So after, working with that band, they had that before I ever was a part of that band. So it was wild to see how we could use hydraulics to not only run lights, but hydraulics to run the stage. And so it just was kind of like, I'm going to do this, with my new band. We just decided to spend the money and design it. And it was kind of funny. We built this monster stage out in the back parking lot of the rehearsal hall. And we were going to do the Uptown Theater as our first show. And and this thing was supposed to be like a big pyramid. It was a pyramid that was supposed to go up. Well, we get down to the Uptown Theater the night of the show, or the day of the show, and we're going to load in the side doors, and we realized we are not going to get this thing through the doors. Nobody ever thought about measuring the opening to the venue before we built this thing. So I remember that first show, we actually didn't get to use the sides of the pyramid. We just used the front with the louvered panels. And it worked fine. It was just, but it was a learning experience. Building stage. It's like I'd never done that before, but it actually was a really cool effect. I mean, we had dry ice machines inside of it and chemical foggers. We had aluminum staircases going up the side of it, And we had catwalks that went over the amplifier, the stack, the back line. And, we had sirens. We had a cannon on the front of it. It would go up, it would roll forward, and then in the middle of Kent's drum solo, this cannon would shoot off, and it would shoot like 50 pounds of confetti. It had aluminum louvers that would open up. We had lights inside of it. It was cool, and it was big enough to where when I blew fire, I could actually go right into the side of the drum riser. So I would blow fire, and for a second, people were blinded by the big flash, and I would go into the side of the drum riser, and by the time their vision comes back, it looks like I disappear on stage. So it was even a little magic there. The disappearing singer. And right up until you catch on fire. So that happened too.
Oh,
one time I set myself on fire. But
oh, gotta love it when you could be a little bit more fire friendly.
Yeah, the human torch.
Tommy, really quick, you mentioned.
Fortunately, I had a good crew who were able to put me out in time before, and the show did go on, but I lost my eyebrows and some eyelash, half the hair on one side where I went like this, and whew, that was back in the Aquanet days. Very flammable.
Memories of Aquanet.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the good old days. Speaking of the people that remember the good old days, Angel, the keeper of the summoners. How's everyone doing on your end?
Awesome. Just keeping up with a lot of the comments and the things fans are talking about. Don't cry, Steve. Jason, they love your shirt. It's a damn shame. Just because Steve is next to you, make it seem like you're calling Steve stupid.
Great.
But I'm glad I'm not in your position, Steve.
True story.
I didn't know who was gonna end up with it.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Steve's at the front of the bus.
Yes, I told you. I'm special.
You are special, and so are our fans, a lot of them who are just showing a lot of love. Want to welcome Barry, Kelly Mike Smith, Christopher Tierney. Thank you for the compliment about our lighting. That really means a lot to me, especially because I make sure people can see me. And Psycho Steve makes sure he lights his bald head so everybody can see how shiny and beautiful it is. So thank you for that compliment. Tara Hansen, thank you for watching. Our good buddy, Lonnie Hammer, thank you for watching, dude.
Lonnie.
What's up, Lonnie?
We appreciate you.
Hi, Tara.
We also got somebody you know. Mike Ross, your old sound man, is watching.
Good sound man. Where are you at now, Mike?
I'm pretty sure I will definitely see it from him.
I haven't.
So, got a question from the fans. Lonnie wants to know, what are some of the new bands that you have been listening to?
Pretty Reckless.
Taylor Momsen.
Can you believe that, right? That gal like Prince Stole Christmas. Really?
Yeah.
Little Windy Cindy Who or whatever. God, I don't know, like real current, but like I've always liked Seether and some, bands like that have really, definitely for a long time I didn't really listen to a lot of music in the grunge alternative wave, but then after years, it seemed like really singers became really, really good. The production came back, and the music came back, and then eventually you started hearing some really good guitars. So one of the new things that I really is Aussie's new record, man. I'm really blown away. I love it. I mean, have you guys heard any of that?
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
duet?
Ordinary Man.
Oh man, dude, the production on that. I mean, it's like, when you go to a concert and you stand right in front of the mains and how the bass and the kick drum goes right through you, and it tickles you, right? Well, it seems like that's always been an elusive beast in the studios to try to capture that on tape. And I was listening to that album in my buddy's truck the other day, and it sounds like whoever produced that record is phenomenal. I mean, the low end and the punch, you feel it. You feel it like you're at a concert. it's like it makes me want to get back out there and start jamming again. Yeah, it really does. That production was just phenomenal. So I love that album. I mean, so that's something that's brand new. Well, I mean, it's not brand new, but I mean, I don't know how long it's been out there, but I just heard it like 3 days ago, and I was like, man, that's a great record. So, and Aussie sings as good as he's ever sang. I mean, he really is singing great. I never would have expected Elton John Aussie duet on the Ordinary Man, but that's a great song as well.
So that kind of brings us to the next question that coincidentally is what we were talking about. Leah Gold, if I misspelled your last name, please forgive me, Goad. She wants to know, do you record on your own record label, and are you working on music?
Yes, it is my own label. I've got my own publishing now, and that was part of putting it out on like TuneCore. You know, it goes out. It's an aggregate company that goes out to like 123 digital websites. So you know, it was imperative to set up, you know, publishing and everything just to protect myself. I have a remake of "I Am the Walrus" by the Beatles, so I had to purchase the right to sell that version, which it's been a kind of a learning experience for me. But I didn't really want to go out there and, you know, break any rules, you know, and get in trouble. But as far as yes, so to answer that, yes, and I'm excited to mix this heavier stuff that I've got, the Bipolar project. Very excited to get in the studio and start mixing that. It's, like I said, it's expensive to get it recorded, but it'll be nice to, and I might not be able to actually mix the whole album, but as I can afford to mix these songs and release them, I'm going to. I don't think I'll wait till the whole thing's done. I'll just, as I can get in and do 3 or 4 at a time, they're going to come out.
And Tom wants to know, will you tour when things get better?
Well, we'll see. You know, I don't know. We'll see. I can't say yes and I can't say no. You know, tour's a pretty big expectation. You know, you've got to have a lot of things in place to go out and actually tour and sustain yourself. So if the offer came, I wouldn't turn it down. But you know, it's a tall order. Touring is it takes a lot of ducks in the row, you know, coming together to make that happen. So I'm not willing to go homeless to tour. I'll tell you that. I'm not going to do that. In my youth, I would have. You know, I lived in a warehouse for many years, so I'm not afraid of taking a chance.
So here's my question. You've been in the industry now for over 30 years. I guess it's kind of like a personal question because I never really asked this question, but is it tough keeping relationships together when you're constantly, like I said, out touring, meeting fans?
Well, you definitely have to have a very secure person in your life, you know, if you want to have a relationship. And I mean, it can happen as long as everybody's on the same page, you know, really. As long as everybody's on the same page. But really, if you have somebody great in your life, and I do have a great person in my life, she's absolutely assisted me, and she's on board, you know. So there's a lot to do to try to make it all happen. So, and me being one of these technologically challenged people and her not, you know, she's very savvy on the world of the web and the internet. So really, I have to have her in the loop, man, to keep me connected. So yeah, so it you know, you just, you know, the older you get, the more you realize what is most important and what is not. And what's most important are the people that you love and that you can count on and you respect. And that's what makes it all really go round. And anything's possible with that, you know. You know, when you're young and you're single, I mean, you know, obviously I've been there too. So, you know, it was exciting. Well, we don't have to dig too deep there, but hey.
No, we don't. We don't want to get you into any trouble.
Yeah,
so.
but you grow up. You grow up and you realize, hey, that was then and this is now, and this is things take on a different shape, and what the important things really start to take precedent in your life.
Absolutely, for
I hope
sure.
that doesn't sound too tame. Like I'm not.
No, not at all.
Tame,
No,
man.
No, because we just don't want to Tommy, we don't want to get you into too much trouble, but that doesn't mean that we can't get Psycho Steve into some trouble. So let's bring him back into this.
Get Psycho Steve into trouble.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I can tell.
All right. Not to rehash the past, but when Banshee was a band with you in the band, everything can you talk about any road stories with other bands that you went on the road with that we know that were either great or not such great to go on the road with?
Yeah, I can. I could tell you a story that
Okay.
kind of funny. I don't want to make anybody look bad or anything, but it was a different day. It was at the Iowa Jam, and it was a Winger. I'm trying to think. Winger. It was Winger, Bullet Boys, and Poison. So,
wow.
Yeah, and it was obviously the Winger was exceptional. He's always been a great guy. I've met him 2 or 3 times. He played on the Monsters of Rock cruise last February. I was on that cruise, and he was phenomenal. I mean, he is absolutely phenomenal. Still knocks it out of the park. But I was backstage for the Bullet Boys, and I remember the guitar player broke. I mean, they were. I don't even. Anyway, the guitar player broke his guitar, and he threw his guitar out into the crowd, and I was able to see it, and it literally hit a girl right in the face.
Oh.
And everybody dove on her to get that guitar.
Oh no.
Yeah, and so then I saw them hauling her through the crowd with just covered in blood. So that was not a good day. This is not a good story. But then later on in the show, some guy came backstage with the guitar covered in blood and wanted the guitar player to sign it, and he took it and said, "That's my guitar." I thought, wow, that was pretty strange, man.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was, but everybody other than that, I mean, all the guys in Poison were super nice. CC DeVille, he's always a real clown. He was, I did the LA Music Awards in 2002, and he was out there, and he was, in good form for CC. Brett Michaels has always been very, very personal, goes out of his way for his fans, and so does Ricky Rocket. Very, very cool guys. Don't really have anything to say about Bobby Dahl. I never really met him. So, but yeah, so I could tell you a lot of stories. I don't really, I'm not having total recall right now.
You're okay. Well, hey, Tommy,
But,
to kind of piggyback off of
I
Steve.
toured with Helix. They were super cool guys. Helix was a great band to play for. When I was really young, we went on tour with the Lick Band. Was on tour with Eddie's. They were cool, So I'll just say they were all cool.
No, for sure, brother. But to piggyback off of Steve's question a little bit, I'm under the impression that you had a moment with John Bon Jovi that involved him buying some of your clothes. Is that true?
That is correct. It was. That is a good story. If you guys are willing to let me jaw on that, it's a good story.
Hell yeah!
Oh, yeah, shoot.
You're about to make Angels Millennium. That's our Bon Jovi night.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second.
What are we drinking now, Angel?
Hold on. If he's taking a drink, I'm taking a drink.
There you go.
Everybody drinking. Yay!
Everybody take a drink.
There we go. All right.
Everybody take a drink. Okay, we're ready for a good rock story.
Yeah,
So-
Tommy, the floor is yours, brother.
Okay, so this is a good story. This was Banshee. We had done the first album. We were not signed to Metal Blade Records or anything, but we were kind of like the big dog in Kansas City, Omaha, in that little Heartland market. And my friend owned a rock clothing store down in Westport, which is like a kind of a really cool part of Kansas City. And they had I used to make, we made our own clothes. So I would make like a jacket or an outfit, and then I would wear it only a couple times, and then I would retire and make another, set of clothes. So that way, we had a fresh look, fresh outfit for each show. And my buddy asked me if he could put those clothes up in his store with some symbols like Banshee. Kent signed some symbols and drum heads, and Terry had some memorabilia, and they did kind of like a Hard Rock Cafe display in his rock clothing store. So anyway, the store was named Rodeo Rags. So he called me up, Bob Lesso, and he said, "Hey, listen, Bon Jovi's in town. They're playing down at Kemper Arena, and I'm going down there to meet their wardrobe lady, to see if they want to buy some clothes." And I guess they contacted him, and they were ready to buy some new outfits, kind of like a mid-tour clothes shopping spree. And he asked me if I wanted to go, and it was like, yeah, sure, I'll go down there. So we went down to Kemper, and we met this gal. Her name was Spanky. I still remember her name. It was kind of an unusual name, but she was a cool chick, and we were walking backstage down the hall, and nobody in the band was there, but their dressing rooms had their name on the door, and you could look in the dressing room, and they had their big trifold wardrobe lockers opened up, and you could just smell the sweat and the fermenting clothes, where they would just lock those sweaty clothes up, pack it up, and hit the road, and they're in the next town, and they were airing those out, and they were like, whoo. And I was looking in like Richie Sambora's wardrobe cabinet, and I was like, that's the jacket, that he wore on that video, and that's the clothes that John wore on that video. It was really cool. And so I was very excited. And then the lady, she asked me, she goes, "Well, are you going to go to the show tonight?" I said, "I would love to go to the show tonight, but I'm a struggling musician, and I'm broke. I didn't have the money to buy Bon Jovi tickets." And she said, "Look, here's a couple tickets. Come to the show." And they were great seats. And so I went back home, and I lived with my drummer, Kent Burnham. And so we're getting all decked out in our Banshee rock, clothes. We're going to go down there and play big shots, at the show. And we had an old jalopy pickup truck that had Safari Ferrari painted on the side. And I told Ken, I said, literally, dude, we're going to have to park in the back of the parking lot and then walk in, because we don't want anybody seeing, Banshee driving this old beat up truck, right? And it was like, he said, "Yeah, okay." So we're getting all, because you got your image you're trying to preserve, right? And you're building this image and a persona. And anyway, I'm looking out my window, and this limousine pulls up out in front of my house. I'm like, "Kent, hey, there's a stretch out here." And we're looking, and we're kind of looking out the window, and this high school kid that used to do some, he handed out flyers for the band. He worked on the crew when we did shows and just did PR work. He got out of the limo, and he come walking up to the door, and he said, "Look, my friend, her parents are very rich, and this is their car. And when she goes to shows, their driver takes her. Are you guys going to Bon Jovi?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Hey, you want to come with us?" I'm like, "Yeah, Now, so we roll up to the show in a limo. And we get out, and everybody's like, "Oh, there's Banshee." And it was like magical. So we're like, didn't have to take the jalopy, Safari Ferrari. And the show was fantastic. We had great seats. Came out of the show, got back to the house. Kent goes to bed. I'm laying in the living room, and I've watched some TV and fell asleep, and the phone rings at about 3 o'clock in the morning. And this is before cell phones. It was landlines. I hate to give away my age, but, landline. And I answered the phone, and they said, "Hey, is this Tommy Lee Flood?" And I'm thinking, who's calling me at 3 o'clock in the morning asking me if I'm me? And I was like, "Yeah, this is Tommy. Who's this?" And he said, "This is John Bon Jovi." And I knew immediately when he said it that it was him, because I just listened to him sing and talk. And I'm like, there was just like dead air. I'm like, well, why are you calling me? He kind of laughed. He said, I'm down here at your friend's clothing store, and we're buying our mid-tour clothesline. And I saw these 2 jackets hanging up here, and I want to buy them, but they said they're not for sale. They belong to a local musician. I hope you don't mind that your buddy gave me your phone number. I said, no, not at all. And he said, well, why don't you come down and meet the band and sell me these jackets? And I said, look, I'd love to meet the band, but the jackets aren't for sale. I'd wore that coat. It was my first Banshee show. I'd wore that twice. And I had the second coat, and I was like, oh, I didn't want to sell them, and I said, I'd love to meet the band, but the coats aren't for sale. He said, well, why don't you just come down here and meet the band? We'll talk about it. I said, okay, I'd love to come down there, but the coats aren't for sale. And he said, well, just come on down. What are you driving? I said, I'll be on a bicycle. I was only like 5 minutes away and had an 18-speed. I said, I'll be on an 18-speed bicycle. He said, I'll have my security guy look for you. So I went in and I wake up my drummer. I said, Kent, Bon Jovi just called me on the phone. He's down at Bob's store and wants to buy my coats. And he's like, Flood, what have you been smoking, dude? Go back to bed. He didn't even believe me. He didn't even believe me. And I'm like, come on, dude, I'm not lying. Why would I lie about that? He goes, dude, I'm not going down to Westport. And so I rode my bicycle down there, and they had pulled up this passenger van right in front of the store window, blocking the view. And there was a couple hundred people that had gathered around that van trying to look through the windows to see the band in the store. And I come pulling up on my bike, and this huge guy comes around. He's like, are you Tommy? And I said, I am. And he said, bring your bike, come on in. And I went into the store, and it was just the band. And actually Bob wasn't there. It was just a store manager. And it was just the band. And they were, so I got to meet everybody in the band. They're very cool. And I literally got to sit there and talk to John Bon Jovi for about 2 hours. They were there for about 2.5 hours buying clothes. And one of the questions that sticks in my mind was, I got to ask them all kinds, and they just sold 33 million albums on Slippery When Wet, and they were just blowing up. And one of the questions that I got to ask, I said, all my life I always kind of had a gut feeling that I would do something in music, but I never really knew, and it wasn't something that I was really looking for, and I certainly never thought I'd be a singer. Did you ever have that feeling like might be your destiny to be in music? And he said, absolutely. I knew all my life this is what I was supposed to do. Not what I wanted to do, but what I was supposed to do. He said, I never dreamed in my wildest dreams I would sell 33 million albums and break the all-time, album sales on a debut album. He said, but it definitely was something that I always had a gut feeling that I was meant to do this. And then, and he was just so down to earth. He was just such a cool, and he goes, did you bring me an album? I see you have an album. And he goes, you see what I'm doing for Cinderella. And Cinderella was the opening band. And, and it's like back then, working so hard and putting your own money into things and trying to do everything right. And there was a lot of people at that time said Cinderella would have never made it if John Bon Jovi hadn't have taken him under their wing, which we all know is not true because Cinderella is a great band, and Tom Kiefer's he's a great guy. But when you're young and you're full of yourself or whatever, you just don't want people taking credit for all your hard work, And I mean, I had worked so hard, putting Banshee together, and I did not take an album down there. I knew what he was taking albums from bands, and he looked at me. He said, "Well, did you bring me an album?" I said, "No, I didn't come down here like that. I didn't come down here to sell my band." Or he said, "Well, why not? You see what I'm doing for Cinderella?" And I said, "Well, I just figured, that every band out there is trying to give you a CD, So I didn't come down there like that. I came down to talk about a couple jackets, And he said, "Well, are you going to sell me the jackets?" And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. I'll sell you one of the coats, but you got to promise me you're going to wear it. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to wear it, all right." And I knew which one he was going to pick. He was going to pick, my favorite, and that's. He said, "I want that one." So he definitely picked it just like that. So they got a ladder out. They got up and they took it down, and he told me, he said, "Anytime you need any help, let me know." And so I waited for a couple months went by, and I was like watching him live on stage and live footage where he's jamming and stuff. And he wasn't wearing my jacket. Well, you guys all know that. Yeah, he wasn't wearing the jacket. I was like, what the hell, you know? So, but like magazines where they take pictures, they don't come out for 3 months. So like if I did like we would do a photo shoot for Hit Parader or something like that, you wouldn't actually see it for 3 months before it would make the magazine. So he was wearing that coat, but he was wearing it in all of his offstage photo shoots, from Teen Beat magazine to the Rolling Stone magazine. He wore it in his live interview where he's sitting there and with all the band and they're rolling through all of his MTV videos and he's talking about marriage being an institution and everything. He's wearing my coat. And because when you wear a jacket on stage, you trash it. You know, being a singer, you sweat profusively. In a matter of a couple shows, that whatever you're wearing is trashed. It's done. You know, so he literally wore that as his look, you know, for about 1.5 years. And then he did an article with Hit Parader, and they were talking to him about, you know, you have some of the top designers in the world make your clothes. You know, what's the favorite jacket you ever had? And he said, my favorite coat was made by a local musician in Kansas City, and it was literally ripped off my body going from the limousine to the venue in London. He said, a piece at a time. So I knew my jacket made it to London. And there's pieces of it now around the world. People got it. So, but yeah, so I have a whole box full of magazines where John Bon Jovi is actually wearing that jacket. And I have, you know, several photo albums of full of me in my first couple Banshee concerts wearing that jacket. So it was, and you know, when we were signed to Atlantic, the magazines were always trying to make a bigger deal out of it than it really was. I did not make clothes for John Bon Jovi. They tried to always push that. Oh, you make clothes for John Bon Jovi. No, I didn't. I made clothes for myself. It just happens to be that I ended up selling, you know, an outfit to John. So.
Dude, that's
true.
killer.
Humble.
That's a gnarly story, man.
Yeah, so it was a true story. So the whole day was very magic, from getting the free tickets to getting the limousine ride. It was like you couldn't have lined up the stars any better. You know, getting to go to the show and then meeting John and then, you know, selling a coat. That was like, you know, it was pretty cool. And, you know, I've always been a Bon Jovi fan. He's a Jersey boy. He's always been really cool. You know, he's no nonsense, just a great artist, and you know, he didn't buy into all the hoopla, and you know, he's just a real dude. So
absolutely. Couple members of the Metal Summit here were having dinner at his restaurant recently and ran into John.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah.
He's still a really cool cat, right?
Yeah, he was really genuine, very quiet. You know.
Now he's got his own pasta line now, right? A pasta
and
line.
wine.
Yeah, like sauce or something like that.
Yeah, he has like pasta sauce. He has wine.
So have you tried it? Is it good?
I have not. He also has a jacket line too. I think. No, I'm kidding.
We need to hook up. You guys. Thanks for that, Steve.
No problem. I'm here for it, bro.
Hell yeah, absolutely. Well, at this time, when we get to like the top of the hour, I want to take a quick second just to thank a couple of the endorsements that we have, some people that support the show and show some love to us as we continue to grow. So we always want to thank Bradley Entertainment for everything that they do for us and the support that they show us, letting us be involved with their live events. We want to thank Levy Metal Enterprises, Levin Lewis. He makes custom guitars and stage props. I want to thank Saren Cadaver out of Rhode Island, Twisted Vines Horror Decor. We thank her so much for being involved as well. And of course, we want to thank our TMS alumni, Mark Hall, Lizzie Borden, for being involved with us and everything they do. They take care of actually clothing some of the members of the Metal Summit. So we really appreciate them being involved with us. And it was great having them as guests on the show. So we thank them all very, very much. Jason, I'm actually going to kick it up to you, brother. Why don't you get back in on this?
Hey, Lizzie Borden kicked ass on the rock cruise, man.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
Real quick, before I kick it up to Jason, I'm a big fan of Lizzie Borden myself, and we definitely want to get him on the show. The Lizzie Borden that I reference is actually Mark's wife. Her real name's Janet, but her performing name from when she does movies, as well as when she used to be a professional wrestler, was actually Lizzie Borden.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. My mistake.
No, not at all. I didn't really think that through as I was saying it, considering this is a metal talk show with a metal band called Lizzie Borden. So I totally didn't really think that through. But now, man, you're totally good. Jason, back to you.
So, so Tommy, let's see. Has there? I know you mentioned about Ronnie James Dio earlier, but has there ever been a time during your career where you were actually starstruck? I'd imagine that you probably were starstruck when you were introduced to Ronnie James Dio, but aside from that, because you already talked about that, where you were actually able to meet somebody that you looked up to or idolized growing up, maybe something like that, or maybe even played with.
I mean, some of the biggest artists that, I mean, I've never been able to meet people that I definitely would have. I mean, anytime you meet somebody that's, in the game and it's your first time meeting them, I mean, I'm a person like anybody, so I would have to say, yeah, I mean, you try not to act like that, but, I mean, definitely you're thinking how cool it is to meet that person, so, and it's a respect thing, but, yeah, I was starstruck when I shook hands with Jimmy Carter, the president,
Nice.
So he's a rock and roll president, man, just so you guys know.
That's cool. How did that happen? How did you get to that
like,
point?
like Allman Brothers, But yeah, I mean, so I have obviously, yeah, I mean, I'm drawing a blank, but I mean, I have met a lot of people. I would say I met, Queensryche down at Rocklahoma. We played down there, and I actually stuck around. We played Friday night. Queensryche played Sunday, and they were doing the Operation Mindcrime, the whole show, and which was, in my opinion, the best Queensryche album ever was Operation Mindcrime. It was just like beyond anything, the thought that went into that album. But I did get a chance to meet the band and Jeff Tate, and it was cool. And I kind of got tongue tied, when I met him. I really, what I wanted to ask him was, dude, what do you do to warm up? Keep your voice going, to sing like that every night, And I got kind of stumbled up and asked him something like, I just said, I can't wait to see you guys do Operation Mindcrime, and, I don't remember what I said, but I'm sure it wasn't what I wanted to say. But I have to say that's probably why, because Jeff Tate's he's a beast, man. I mean,
Absolutely. 100% for sure.
Yeah.
Bobby Griswold, get back in on this, dude.
Come on.
So, Tommy, you talked about the jacket, you talked about this. So I'm looking at early stages of Banshee and to where they are now. When you left the band, they brought the lead singer in from, I guess he sang with Omen and, a lot of the harder bands. Were they trying to go that route while you were in the band, or was that a decision they made after you left, or was that a reason why you left?
Well, the band, we've gotten back together several times over the years to do tours, mini tours, Rocklahoma, whatever. After 2008, we went our separate ways. Me and the guitar player, Terry Dunn. There's no mystery about our estranged relationship and being the two guys that founded Banshee. It's just, without going deep and into the wormhole and bringing up all the dirty laundry, I'll just say, we had differences. And it was apparent that we were never going to work together again. So the band, the actual group, Banshee, is not a part of that new Banshee. It's Terry Dunn, the guitar player, formed his own version of Banshee, and it's heavier. And he brought in a singer. His name was George Call, and the guy's really he's a good singer. I mean, he definitely is completely different than Banshee, but he's a fine singer. But he could no more sing me than I could sing him. I mean, I have my style.
Yeah.
It's his style, and I would just say this: if you're going to be Banshee, then you better be able to sing the songs that were on the 3 albums that people know, that were on MTV and on the radio. And so they never really considered that. They really don't play any of that music when they play live, and it's really just a version of Terry's new version of Banshee. So without, doing anything mean or saying anything bad, with a smile on my face, I wished him well. I think they would have been better suited to have a new name, because it is nothing like Banshee. And anybody that was ever in Banshee, we split everything equal. Even though I wrote the lyrics and the melodies and a portion of the music, and Terry wrote the lion's share of the music. We always split everything equal with the drummer and everything. We didn't want any head trips over. I mean, we didn't want our drummer washing dishes while the rest of us were, doing well. So that doesn't help to keep your band going. So we split everything equal. So anybody that was in Banshee can use the name Banshee if they choose to do that. The other members of Banshee and myself, we've never would ever do that. I have way too much respect for the fans and all the crew and everybody that worked with us. Their dream was our dream. Our dream was their dream. I would never do anything like that. So I've always played Banshee because that's what people want to hear when you play out. They don't necessarily want to hear all your solo stuff. They like to hear that Banshee stuff. And I've always played it, and I've played it well. So with that being said, Terry's version of Banshee is considerably heavier. It's not my cup of tea, but everybody has their own taste. So I would let the fans speak for that.
Well, it's very similar to when Karabi came into Crew. He
Right.
didn't sing like Vince, and that album, which is a good album, does not
Awesome.
sound like the Crew everybody knows. But getting back to the name thing, look, we've all seen these festivals where you see the only member in the band is the drummer or this, and there's so many inklings of, and you're like, wait a second, it's not the band. And I don't want to do any ill to anybody, but Quiet Riot now is going out with nobody in the band and using the name.
Yeah, I'm not into that. I worked really hard to put back as close to the original lineup for Rocklahoma in 08. I came back from the Florida Keys to Kansas City to have everybody come in and facilitate it here. And the only person we were unable to get to commit was Bill Westfall, the bass player. And he was in Texas and obligated, but we got Tyson Leslie, who's really well connected, great bass player. He did the LA Music Awards with me in 2002. And it's funny because he's also Oriental. So Banshee, like Spinal Tap, has always had the exploding keyboard player, right? Well, Banshee always had the Oriental bass player. So we had Chuck Hopkins. He was half Japanese, half American. And then we had Bill Westfall, who was half Japanese, half American Indian. And then Tyson Leslie, who was I believe he's Taiwanese, but he's definitely Asian. And so he looked like a young, Bill Westfall, and was a great player. So it was kind of like, if people weren't too close to the stage, they might have even thought Tyson was Bill. But but I worked very hard to get Bill and Terry and me and Kent and get us all back together, because a lot of people that were playing down there, as you said, Bobby, there was like maybe 1 or 2 people in the original band. I thought, we had people from 59 countries coming in, and a lot of people were coming to see Banshee for the first time. We got in a pissing match with Atlantic Records, and didn't get to tour overseas, and you know, a lot of people never got to see Banshee play live. So in my mind, it was like, look, we have all these fans coming from around the world that would like to see Banshee. No matter how stressful it is getting the band back together, I think it's worth it, you know, to pull the original lineup or as close to that as we could possibly do.
Yeah.
So, and it was stressful. I mean, you know, working with Terry was very stressful. We are on different pages, you know, definitely. And you know, he's likes to party, you know. That's mildly saying it, mildly. And I'm more of a like take care of business and then party. You know, but get the job done first. You know,
Yeah.
do the job. So, and being the guy that always made the phone calls and had to deal with everybody on the business before, during, and after, I was always the guy. You know, so you know somebody has to keep it together. You know, so it's you know it can be stressful. You know.
Well,
You know what?
Rock-
You know what?
Did I?
Tommy?
Was I nice?
Tommy,
Hey,
it's actually kind of
was I
funny.
nice about that?
Yeah, but the thing that's
Okay.
actually kind of funny that I have to chime in real quick about what you were talking about, your Spinal Tap moment as far as like bass players for the band, is because um, Banshee, after you left Tommy in like 2011, 2012, they did a tour where their bass player at the time couldn't do the tour. But the guy who actually came in to fill in was this guy, Micah Haruchi, who's mostly well known for being in the band Falling in Reverse. And he's a Japanese American.
See, I'm telling you, dude. I did not know that, but it
Yeah.
makes sense, man. So it was meant
Yeah.
to be, you know. They say history repeats itself, you know. That's great. I did not know that.
Yeah, so I always thought that was hilarious. And Falling in Reverse, they're one of those like newer kind of screamo, hot topic, explosion metal bands. They do very well. My buddy Max is actually their guitar player right now, and they're a very very good live band. But when you mentioned that about how Banshee always seemed to be like the band with an Asian bass player, I'm like, that's actually hilarious considering this guy who happens to be a Japanese American descent filled in because he wasn't in the band. He was filling in for the bass player who couldn't do the tour. I was like, man, even the fill-in guys gotta stay in line with the Banshee history.
It's a trip, man. I've always kind of looked back and thought, you know, that is so weird, but you know, yeah. All right.
Absolutely, for sure. Angel, let me bring you and the fans back in, man. I appreciate your presence, buddy. It's been a second.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, just want to welcome some of our new fans that we definitely see. Bill Ellis, Carla Rice, which is everybody. Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday, whatever you're celebrating. Dana Gill, just want to say welcome. And me as a joke, instead of Bon Jovi, this house is not for sale. This jacket is not for sale. No.
Hey, I caved. I did sell it. I didn't tell you what he paid me for it.
I was just about to ask you that.
Well, Steve, hold that question.
Can we get to the fans for a cycle, Steve?
Of course.
I was going to ask you how much did you pay to shave the hair, but I'll ask you that later. Okay. I got a question from Bill Ellis. He wants to know, what's the inspiration for Thrill Seeker?
Okay, Thrill Seeker. My dad is a full colonel jet fighter pilot, retired from the Air Force. Flew 2 wars, 100 missions in Vietnam, and the inspiration basically was it's a large, like if you in that song it starts off with a jet taking off, and I'm a scuba diver. You know, I mountain climb. I do a lot of things, but the inspiration started off with my dad. You know, taking it to the pushing the envelope as a jet fighter pilot. He flew in reconnaissance, and then it just kind of grew from there. But the song Thrill Seeker is basically about the thrill that could kill you, the kill thrill, meaning like these guys that wear the squirrel suits, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know, they're alive when they're doing that. But man, one little thing goes wrong and splat, you know. But it's like, you know, climbing Yosemite, jumping out of an airplane, flying a jet at Mach 2. It's the thrill that puts your life in danger is what keeps you alive. So Thrill Seeker is about a thrill, adrenaline junkie, basically. Basically keeps you alive, and you go out and you push the envelope in life, and that's what actually becomes keeps you alive. So does that make sense?
Yep, it makes a lot of sense. I'll bring it up to Dana Gill. She wants to know what happened to the long, beautiful hair.
Well, I just cut it off. I got 4 inches cut off yesterday. I was like, it was just, I hadn't done anything since COVID. And it was just out of control, man. I just had to get it cut. So it's not that bad.
It's all right. Jay got a haircut recently too, so
It's like, I was down to like eight ponytail ties. It was like when I tied it back, it was like, this is crazy, man. I was sitting on it, laying on it, sleeping on it.
That's the worst.
Yeah. So can't hardly wear black clothes
Steve
anymore.
complain about that all the time.
Every
Hanging
day.
And I'm going to take it up to Bruce Logan. He wanted me to ask you about the Beaver, and again, he just wanted us to give a shout out to the late Bill Westfall. So.
Yeah. Amen to Bill. Yeah, the bass player Bill Westfall. We lost Bill last spring. That was a big loss. He had fought cancer, throat cancer, for 2 or 3 years, and super talent. And I absolutely shout out to Bill. It was a tough loss. He was a fabulous player. And so Bruce is asking about the Beaver. So, okay, he's asking about the Beaver.
I know nothing about that.
Yeah,
I mean, either.
it was the Beaver that
Leave
you
it to
don't want
Beaver.
to wake up next to. I manage.
Wait. We got to let Bobby leave the room.
I manage.
What happens? I'm just a happy guy.
Yeah. So I manage a professional hunting ranch. It's all private. It's out of Blue Mound, Kansas, and we do trophy whitetail, turkey, and quail. And it's just for the guy that owns the place. Is for his family and his clients. But it really is a cool gig. I've done it for 12 years now. Ford takes really good care of me, and it's a beautiful ranch. It's like got a Bass Pro Shop type cabin down there. And recently we've had these beaver have moved into one of our stock ponds, and they're eating all the trees. I mean, they've dropped 100 trees. The destruction is unprecedented. So last week the neighbor down there who helps me, we set out some traps. I mean, I've never trapped beaver in my life. You know what I mean? I'm not a beaver trapper, but whatever. He had some traps, showed me how to set them, and I was like, I don't even know if I wanted to touch them because you don't want to get snapped by one of these things, But he kind of showed me. We put these traps out, and we caught a 60-pound. We caught a 60-pound beaver. So. I don't know whether to be happy or sad or whatever, but it's a big beaver, man. So I went down for the boss and got him and took him to a taxidermist, because and everybody's like, well, that's the biggest beaver we ever saw. So like, okay, we're gonna get him, tanned or whatever, So I think that's what Bruce is referring to. I sent him a picture of that beaver. It's a big beaver.
I haven't seen one of them.
It's not the kind.
Oh, no.
Bobby, it's not the kind you want to wake up to.
I never do.
It's not Winona's big brown beaver either.
I got thinking Les Claypool there for a minute.
That's great.
Oh, geez. Angel, reel us back in, brother.
Okay. Susan Hey, Susan Walsh, thank you for listening, for watching.
She probably isn't now. No.
Well, she still is. I got a feeling. She wants to know, what's your favorite Banshee song?
Oh boy. Well, that's a tough one. I mean, I have many friends. When you write the lyrics and the melody, they all, I mean, they're all like your children, you know. I mean, you put a lot of time into each song and try to make it the best, and that you can. Um, you know, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I like I like "Color Me" off the third album. It is a great song. I mean, obviously, I like "Shoot Down the Night." It was successful on MTV, but I like "Color Me." I like that third album. Is my favorite album just because you can definitely hear the band, you know, graduating from one album to the next album, and then we're really coming into our own sound. And I like the song "The Spell," and that was one of and the song "Desire" off the third album. Those were two songs that Eddie Kramer produced, and you know, I loved his work, you know, and I just like the way those songs turned out. So I can't say there's any one song, you know, but I have my favorites, you know. Some of them are just too hard to sing anymore, man. I'm just kidding. Like "Crying the Night." Try that one on for size.
Absolutely, for sure. Angel, do we have a question from you, brother, before I turn it into our final round?
Yeah, my question is, and again, it's a question you actually asked Ozzy. How do you keep your voice in great shape? Because I know a lot of singers at times they have that fear, that concern about losing their voice or not being able to hit the notes. How do you maintain your voice after all these years?
Well, I think you know, as a singer, you're born with a gift. Like if you're Tiger Woods, you're born to play golf. I mean, you still have to work very hard at it to become as good as he is. But I mean, you're born with the talent to sing, and the more you sing, I mean, the easier it is, and the more conditioned your throat is. I mean, your vocal cords are a muscle. Obviously, if you don't sing for a while, you're going to get rusty. But you don't ever forget how to sing. You know, you just get rusty where your endurance isn't quite what it used to be, and it just takes, you know, coming back and singing and you know, doing the work, exercise, and you know, it's a weird thing because everything can affect your voice, from what you ate to allergies, or it's just even your emotions. It's really weird. It's like you can't just change a guitar string or a drum head, you know, as a singer. It's like it's really weird. That's one of the things I don't think, you know, it's hard to master it. I mean, you get good at it and you try to be consistent, but it's something that, you know, anything can throw you a curveball. You can get sick, you know, whatever. But to keep your throat up, it's just a matter of conditioning. It's just a muscle. You just sing. You know, the more you sing, the easier it is. Pretty soon, you know, you're doing split screams, and it's the easiest thing you can do, you know. But that comes with just a lot of hours of singing. Banshee used to practice 3 or 4 nights a week, 3 or 4 hours a night, you know, and that was kind of our minimum thing, where we put the time in, and we always felt like, you know, and same with my solo projects. It's like, you know, if you want to be great, you can only be as good as the weakest link of your band, and the singer has to sing. So the band, you know, in order to get up to that level, the band has to rehearse. You know, rehearse. That's the key.
Absolutely, for sure. Tommy, as we steer to our final round of questions, do you still have a couple more minutes with us?
I do.
Awesome. Cool, man. We definitely appreciate you spending your evening with us as well.
I'm not boring you.
Oh, hell no, dude. This has been great, man. We've been having a great time. Psycho Steve, why don't you bring us in for this final round, my good dude?
All right, so you brought up the singing and everything. If you were going to put an all-star band and you being the front man, of course, who would the members be?
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, I mean, drummers, I mean, Tommy Aldrich, man. I mean, I don't even know if he's still out there, but my God, what a beast, you know.
Whitesnake.
Doug Aldrich, you know, obviously is a great guitar player. Oh God. Rudy Sarzo on bass. I mean, what can you say? I'm old school, so I'm reaching out there. Steve Vai, dude. I mean, he's not even from this planet, is he? Is he?
No.
No, he's not even from here, is he? He's from some other galaxy. But I mean, yeah, there's so many great players out there. It would be hard. I mean, there's so many people out there that I would be honored to play with that it would be hard to put together any one all-star, lineup because there's so many great players.
Right on.
Absolutely. Psycho, before ask him about the price, dude. You know you want to.
All right. How much did Bon Jovi give you for the jacket?
Okay, so after all the talking, and I agreed to sell him his jacket, and he picked the one, and we got it out. And he said, "Well, what do you want for it?" And he literally had two hands full of crisp $100 bills. I mean, $2,000 or $3,000 in his hand, and he just fanned them out like a deck of cards. He goes, "Well, what do you want for it?" And I said, it cost me about $200 to make that jacket. I said, it's all hand sewn, and so it's not perfect. He said, well, actually, what I really like about that jacket is you can tell that it was all hand stitched. I said, and it's not new anymore. I wore it twice, so how's $150 sound? And he looked at me like I was out of my mind, and he said, dude, I mean, really, $150? And I'm like, you asked me what it's worth to me in a dollar figure, and it's worth $150. Because the jacket was sentimental to me, so it really wasn't about the money,
Right.
And he wore it, so that was the big deal. He wore it a lot, so I got my thing out of it, I should have asked for more though. Now that I think about it,
You hired me.
he would have given me anything I asked for. He would have given it to me.
Now it's
Right.
floating around. Now it's floating around London.
Yeah. Yeah, when you're young, you don't think of things like that, you know what I mean? But you look back and you think, oh, I should have asked for more money. But it wasn't about the money.
Gotcha.
For sure, man. Absolutely. Jason, let's kick it up to you, brother.
So, what's all right. So, where haven't you played yet that you would like to play? Like, it could be in a different country or anything like that.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of places overseas I'd love to play. Banshee really, we never got to go abroad. I'd love to. My girl is from Australia, and I've been there. And it's a wonderful country and super cool people. I'd love to go to Australia, and on the boat. More than once I've met, guys from Australia that were Banshee fans, and they were just the funnest people to hang out. They know how to party, man. Let me tell you. Yeah, yeah. Me and the Aussies, we shut the boat down on the first night in February. I mean, I think we went till like 4:30 in the morning. But so yeah, there's a lot of places, mostly abroad. I would love to play. Would be cool.
Nice.
Nice.
That's really, really cool. Tommy, actually, the last question that I'd like to ask you, just because I always find this stuff to be really interesting with the changing of the tides and the constant conversation about what record labels really do or don't do for bands nowadays as opposed to back in the day. I mean, you started off with Metal Blade, which is still to this day considered just a dominant upper echelon record label. We mentioned Lizzie Borden, even by accident, but we mentioned Lizzie Borden earlier in the interview. And then you moved on to Atlantic. So I'd love to hear a little bit about, what was going on at the time that you left Metal Blade to go to Atlantic, and then subsequently what was the end of Atlantic. I'm just, hearing it from the people that lived it. I'd love to hear it again.
Well, back in the day, it's like if you were on an indie label, Metal Blade being the biggest, basically back in the day, Metal Blade was the biggest independent label out there. You were kind of like tainted. Not a lot of bands that went on to indie labels ever made it to a major label. So there was a really big deal about Banshee being on Metal Blade and then being picked up by Atlantic. It just wasn't something that happened a lot. It was kind of like once you were on an indie label, you were labeled. So I remember we were actually a guest on the Morton Downey Jr. show. They had a show that was about the politics of rock and roll and record deals and all that. And they had Banshee. Me and my drummer were actually guests on that show, and the whole show was about how did we go from an independent label to a major label. That was just like never heard of. So they actually had Jonathan Blank from Blank and Blank New York. Our attorney was a guest on the show, and and they were talking, Ace Frehley was on the show talking about politics and how Kiss came up through the ranks. And they had a couple girl bands talking about how it was, do girls have to sleep with guys, to get on record deals or whatever. But it was, on Metal Blade, because when they signed Banshee, they literally had a staff of 40 or 50 people, and they worked that record every day. I mean, every day they had an interview, or they got us on another radio station, or had us in another magazine. And Metal Blade was the kind of label where they could put so much money out for your deal, and they had so many bands, but it was all controlled. It wasn't like Atlantic where they just sign 100 bands a year and they just throw you out there and see what happens. Metal Blade couldn't afford to do that. Even though they were a good-sized independent label, they still managed their money and they worked their bands. So when we were on Metal Blade, it was it was very fun and exciting. And, Brian Slagle was so cool, and John Sutherland, and it was just very exciting. They flew the band to LA, and we did 125 interviews in 2 days, literally, that they set up before we ever got to LA, and 2 photo shoots. So they utilized those 5 days we were there. We were constantly working and doing something for the label. Where going to Atlantic and to a major label, there was a lot more money. The budget was a lot bigger. There was a guaranteed MTV video, which was something that was very rare. Not a lot of bands ever got a guaranteed video contract. A lot of bands would be signed, and then their management company would come up with the money to do the video, and then they kind of co-opt with the label. Like, once the album broke, then the label would put more money. They'd give you the initial record deal. You'd set up a budget. But in our case, we were signed to 10 albums, and on Atlantic, and with a guaranteed MTV video. And we were on Titanium Atlantic, which was a brand new division of Atlantic, headed up by Jason Flom, Andy Setcher, and Paul O'Neill, who Paul O'Neill, created and was the main guy behind TSO, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and he also was the main guy behind the Badlands. And they had signed Jakey Lee's band, the Badlands. They got Jakey from Aussie, and they formed that band. They were the first band on Titanium, and Banshee was the second band. And so there was good money and everything, but it was kind of weird. It was like the Badlands took the front seat. And Banshee being the second band, we were like in the back, the second seat. So they had put a lot of money into Jakey Lee to leave Aussie, and they spent well into $1 million on that band, trying to break that band. So there was a lot of politics involved. And fortunately, we were able to still survive. People, the media and radio out there, they like Banshee, but and we had people on our side of the fence doing promotion, but it became very frustrating, man. Atlantic really, it's kind of like they never really pushed Banshee like they should have. Even when we had a hit MTV video with Shoot Down the Night, we were still wondering where the support was. And when you have fans all over the world and people in the magazines writing articles like, why isn't your label giving you more support? It was frustrating. And like I said in the beginning, putting Banshee together and building it with your own 2 hands and creating your own fan base and marketing yourself, and then you think you're at, the rainbow end, and you sign that major record deal, and your experience with Metal Blade was very positive, and then to get on Atlantic Records, and it seems like all the magic is in place, and then eventually realizing that it's really not a very good fit, you know. And we were kind of at the tail end of, you know, if you have to realize 80s rock was, in my opinion, one of the most exciting times in music. I'm glad I got to be a part of it. You know what I mean? I'm so happy that it happened, you know, for me then. But we kind of came in at the end where alternative hadn't kicked in, but we were definitely in that last 3 or 4 year where 80s metal had become saturated. The business was saturated. So if you signed Cinderella, then all of a sudden you have 5 other bands out there that sound or look like Cinderella. So A&R guys were just like bands, where A&R guys lose their job just like bands get dropped. You know, if you sign a couple dud bands, you're going to lose your gig at the label. So when it came to a point where people were afraid, they didn't know what to sign, they would automatically just sign what was popular. Like when Cinderella broke, Brittany Fox got signed. I mean, I could name a dozen different scenarios. And then they would, when you were on top, they would just want you to put out an album every year, 1, 2, 3, and they literally called it the 3-album hump. Or if you can make it over that 3-album hump, you'll do records for the rest of your life. But when you sign that 50-page contract, there's not one clause in that contract that benefits the band. It's all about the label. And if you sell enough records, you can renegotiate that contract in between albums. But we were committed to do an album a year for 10 years. Didn't matter. They could sit on you for 3 years and not do an album. But you were committed under contract. And what happens is you write Shoot Down the Night and Precious Metal or a couple songs like that, and you're on the radio and you're doing well, or on MTV, they want you to write 10 more songs just like that. And you're writing the best material that you've ever written because you're constantly growing as an artist. And there's no artist development anymore. Those days are long gone. So you're trying to write the best songs that you know your fans are going to dig. And they'll go, oh, you know, they're nice, but write 10 more. We need to hear 10 more Shoot Down the Night. So what you have is you get bands that are forced to, the thought of losing their record deal or being sat on for 3 years, having to kick out these songs that sound like the first record they put out. And all of a sudden, you put, by the time you put out 3 albums, everybody's burned out in your sound, and you're done. I could name so many bands that did 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. So there is something to be said about the 3-album hump. If you can make it 3 albums and actually have a fan base left over that's not sick of you, to get to do that 4th album, you might be doing records for the rest of your life. But it's a machine, and it grinds you up and it spits you out, and it literally sucks the magic out of it. And you realize that the only real thing is the fans, your band, and the music that you make. And it becomes so frustrating that you're just at the point where you're being sat on for 3 years, which is what Atlantic Records did to us when they didn't know what was going to happen with the industry. And alternative was kicking in, Nirvana, and there was other bands that were coming out that were literally tearing up the charts. And people were scared to sign bands. They just didn't know what to sign because the A&R guys that were still sitting in the hot seat, they'd been signing 80 rock. So it took somebody with big kahunas to go out and sign a band like Pearl Jam or Nirvana or bands like that, where it was completely different. It was probably some young guy that really didn't have anything to lose by signing that band. You know, it's not like he had this track record where he's like, oh, if I sign this and it blows up in my face, I'm going to lose my gig. So they decided to exercise a 3-year option on us, or they sat on us for 3 years. We weren't able to play under the name Banshee. We weren't able to record. And it was like, we weren't going to go out and create a pseudo name just to go out and do gigs. You know what I mean? It was like, that was stupid. And it was very, very frustrating. It took a real hard toll on everybody in the band. And we ended up getting a lawyer, and it wasn't cheap. And we proceeded to try to get out of our 10-album deal. And that's why if you go into Atlantic Records and you look, anybody that's ever been on Atlantic Records, they're in the library, you know, whether they got dropped or not, whether they sold 1 album or 10 albums or 10 million records, you know, it doesn't matter. They're in the library. But if you look for Banshee, we've been stricken from the history because that's how bad it pissed them off when we took them to court to be released from our deal. And it never actually went to court, but our lawyer went in and we were released and cut, and we were cut with nothing. And anybody that has any other story about the way it went down is a liar. That is the truth. So there's been a lot of theories about how Banshee came to end as far as Atlantic, and I wish they were true because, one involves a hot chick that was in our MTV video that one of the guys in Atlantic was in love with. That it never happened. I wish I could take credit for that, but it really never happened. So with all the bullshit out there about that, I wish I would have got with that chick, but it simply never happened. It was just a rumor.
Gotcha.
So, but that's the true story, and that's really the sad thing about the industry. I don't know how it works nowadays, with bands. I mean, back then you didn't have the internet. You couldn't really market yourself. I mean, the internet was there, but it wasn't really a tool that people used. It was pretty much in the infantile state as far as music. So you had to have a major label, and you absolutely had to be on MTV if you were going to be anybody. So in hindsight, when I look back and I think we went with Atlantic because they offered us basically 5 times more money than Metal Blade offered. They offered us a 6-album deal. And they just didn't have the budget, that a big label had. So Atlantic offered us 5 times more money. And at the time, Metal Blade, some of their bands got on MTV, not all of them, because, videos cost money. And like Lizzie Borden, I mean, they had some good bands that they put on MTV. But, there was no guarantee that you would make MTV on Metal Blade Records. And basically, if you ever wanted to hit HOR radio, mainstream radio, and you wanted to chart worldwide, you better have an MTV video. That was just a given. So in hindsight, we went for the money. We went for the MTV video. It did get the name out there. We weren't, the biggest star or the brightest star, but it's there and it happened. But, when I look back and I think of how well Metal Blade treated us and the camaraderie we had with that label and how hard they worked our music, I think in the long run, we would have been better off going with a smaller budget and taking our shot at, getting really broke by Metal Blade. And then eventually that would have led to an MTV video. And I think they had more of an artist development program where they weren't just going to throw one album out there and just see where you land, because they didn't have the budget to just throw people up against the wall and see if they stick. And if you don't stick, you're out, They had to keep working you because it was an investment. So there's things you always look back and you think there's other things that you could have done that were, better, wiser. Maybe I should have looked at that girl that was in the video, but really, she was in our video, for Christ's sakes. But no, I mean,
Maybe, dude, maybe.
I've never. It was hard not to look at her. She was shooting the video with us, for crying out loud. But anyway.
But it's the truth, man. Metal Blade, they had to be grinders,
Yes.
because they were smaller and stuff. It's just definitely the way that they had to do it. Bobby Dreyer, my good dude, let me kick it over to you before I kick it up to Angel and the Summoners.
All righty, so we're gonna have a little bit of fun now. So for Christmas, how naughty have you been, and what'd you do?
I've been stupid, tame, safe. I trapped a beaver. How safe is that? Hey, we'll just leave it at that. I trapped a 60-pound beaver. Let people's imagination run wild.
Exactly.
It was big, it was brown. No, I'm planning a trip to Alabama. I'm going down to see my brother and my dad.
Very
Nice.
I'm looking forward to that. And I haven't deer hunted in many years, but my dad and my brother would like me to hunt, so I might actually do a little deer hunting down there. So I don't know if I'll shoot anything, but it'll be good to go out and just sit in the woods,
Nice.
Awesome.
Very, very cool, for sure. And Angel, let's kick it up to you, buddy. Final question from yourself, and anything final that the Summoners and the Banshee fans want to speak up on.
Okay. Question from Lonnie Hammer, but I need help with pronouncing it because I suck at pronouncing this word. What tour bus do you prefer?
Provost.
Silver, yep. Yeah, that was the word. Or the silver eagle. Thank you.
Yes. Actually, the
I
best tour
struggled with
bus
that
is
word.
really to be in a hotel and let the crew stay on the tour bus. Tour buses are nice, but they're cramped, and eventually you're smelling somebody's dirty socks or whatever. So it's nice to get to where you're going and be able to go get in a hotel room.
I want to know what the whatever is.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like this to be a family-friendly show, and
It's always that.
This has never been a family friendly show.
No, never.
oh, my
We're
girl
respectful of everything. We're
My girl
respectful of
watched-
everything, but this is not This is not a PG show.
No.
Oh
We don't
man,
have no
Hey.
warning labels.
I want to wish all you guys a Merry Christmas, and I definitely want to extend an offer to all of you. You ever want to come to Kansas City, for sure, I will host you and we'll have a good time. There's a lot of great food. There's so many good things to do. Like I said, maybe if your football team, comes out and there's playing the Chiefs, I tell you what, we tailgate great, and everybody loves the opposing teams. We always have a great time. It's not like it used to be when you went to Oakland and you were in the black hole. There's no danger of coming to Arrowhead. You'll be safe.
Absolutely, for sure. Well, Tommy, we definitely appreciate you. Before I cut you loose, Angel, I want to kick it right back to you, just in case there was anything final from yourself.
No, it's kind of between me and a fan, Tara. She kind of had a comment, but I kind of want to turn into a question. She
Absolutely.
says you're very smart about. She says you're very smart about band management. You should be a band manager. Is that something that you would consider in the future? Maybe managing bands? Or
I think I could be a very good man. I've learned a lot through the years of having. I could be a concert promoter. I mean, I promoted every concert Banshee played until we were signed to Atlantic Records. I mean, from renting the venue to getting the millions of dollars worth of insurance, the production, the transportation, security guards, the janitors at the end of the night to clean up the trash, the backstage deli trays, the laminate passes, the radio ads, the flyers, there's a million things. Checking the concert forecast, 3 months in advance.
right.
And honestly, I would definitely consider doing something like that. I mean, I love people, and I'm one of these guys. I can think about 1,000 things at a time. I love breaking it down, and putting the pieces in the right order. So.
Right on.
Just like you guys.
Absolutely, 100%. Well, as a final thing, Tommy, please tell the fans that are watching the show as fans of yours, as well as people that are now discovering you, where can they find you?
TommyLeeFlood.net, and there's also a Tommy Lee Flood /Banshee Facebook site out there. And Scott does a good job, and if they want to come to Kansas City, man, they can find me right here. I love partying with everybody, man. Wow. I like
play
meeting everybody.
anywhere?
I love meeting people. That's just my thing.
Do you play anywhere in Kansas City?
Uptown Theater is a great venue. The Voodoo is at Harris Casino. I mean, but we'll see. I mean, there's not a lot of things going on as far as live shows. People are still kind of in that, COVID mode. So, I have friends that have rock and roll bar venues that they're struggling right now, and they're actually struggling to get bands in there. Bands that want to perform. There's a shortage of that. So. Yeah, so I'm sure if it happens, they will know.
Gotcha. Well, for sure, man. Well, Tommy, we got to thank you, man, so much for taking some time out of your evening to get to rock with us, man. You can talk about what you've been doing, talk about your extensive history, a lot of funny stories. And, what's always important to us is that you had a good time and you really had a good time being a participant on this show.
I had a great time, man. I was a little nervous, but you guys really set my mind at ease, and I absolutely had a great time, and I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to be on the show. It was an honor. Thank you.
Awesome, man, for sure. No, absolutely. We definitely had a great time. It's always a good time, getting to sit down and just talk shop. We love doing the show, and it was such a good time having you for sure. But we definitely want to thank you again so much for taking some time, and we look forward to having you again on the show in the future.
Can't wait. Can't wait.
Absolutely.
Stay healthy.
Absolutely, for sure. I'll reach out to you in the near future.
What do you guys want for Christmas? What do you want?
I'm just going to go visit my mom and my stepdad, who I haven't seen because of COVID, because my stepdad's 90, he's very high risk. So I've really just been staying away from the house, but we're going to make time to see each other.
All right. Well, be safe and Merry Christmas.
Yeah, I'm driving to Disney.
Okay.
Going to Disney?
Yeah, I'm driving to Disney.
There you go, man.
That's
a great place.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Angel, plans?
I'm going down to see family, and I hope I see some big titties. I mean, it's COVID. I haven't seen much of that.
Yes, I think that would be nice.
Big brown beaver.
Exactly. Maybe Tommy can help you with some big beaver or something like that, dude.
Beaver.
Kansas City. Ladies in Kansas City, if you got big titties, hit me up. I'm coming down to see
you. There you go. Absolutely.
Come to Kansas
Jason,
City.
you're probably going to be spending time with your family and your kids and all that stuff for the holidays, I can assume, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Are you going to wear that shirt tomorrow?
We're doing it here. I wear it every chance
Absolutely.
I can.
Right on. Well, again, thank you guys so much for watching us as always. We want to thank Tommy Lee Flood for taking time and rocking out with us for sure. Follow us on all of the major social media outlets. You can find us under the Metal Summit under everything. Facebook, Instagram. You can find us under the YouTube page for the Metal Summit. Definitely like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube page, the Facebook page, Instagram. Definitely allow us to keep bringing these awesome shows for you guys, because we love doing it. We love bringing it to you, and we love you guys so much for watching us forever and continuing on as we turn around the end of this year, get right into next year, and keep bringing these shows to you. But again, thank you all so much on behalf of the Metal Summit, for Angel, for Jason, for Bobby, for Psycho Steve, for Jay. Again, thank you so much to Tommy Lee Flood. We appreciate everybody. And once again, you've been watching the Metal Summit.
Yeah.
You too, Tommy. Thank you.